Thank you, Brad.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about community organizing for policy change. Over the past couple years, I've done a lot of different community organizing, so I'm really just kind of sharing the tips and things I found have worked for me and been useful, and things other people have taught me. So one of the big things with community organizing is going to be about finding a common interest. There's going to be a lot of groups who have a broad interest in a subject, but they may not be specifically focused on your policy. So one of the big things is going to be finding those groups with the common interest and kind of getting them to zero in on, okay, this is the policy that we want to work on that will achieve the goals we're looking to achieve. So the first way to kind of get started with that is finding those supporters. I think one of the best ways to find those supporters, starting off, is with the existing groups who have broad, overarching values, but not necessarily focused on exactly what you're focused on. They may not have that connection, but them being part of the community and being affected by that policy is a way to draw them in. So getting in front of those groups and talking to them, even if the whole group doesn't decide it's their thing, it's going to be really good, because in those groups you're going to find supporters and people who are really passionate about your cause or your policy. So some of the groups I found a lot of success with have been the neighborhood groups, high schools and colleges, organizations, and also classes, especially government classes are really good. You'll find kids who, lots of the government classes, they'll need volunteer hours, they'll need work to do, and they're looking for something they're actually interested in. So if you go speak to them, I get 2 or 3 kids who your subject is something they really, really do care about, and then that's a way to build up your volunteer base and be able to kind of get that start. Another way for searching for members and people who are willing to do work for you is to remember how important the internet is, and not just Facebook. I think that's the first thing everybody thinks of, is just going through Facebook groups and finding people that way. But there's also, especially if it's a policy that's really, really going to be on a local level, especially if it's more neighborhood-based, there's like Nextdoor, which is pretty much an app for neighbors to get on and complain about their neighborhoods. But if you can find, if you get on there, you can post about, okay, this is something that's going to be affecting our neighborhood. Would everybody like to come together? I'm having a training on this. Let's talk about this. Let's get some more information. So really expanding beyond just the basic, okay, I'll look for groups that kind of sound like they would be supportive on Facebook. Another thing, I know I talked to our former policy organizer, now our community organizer, Shannon, about is using Vote Builder to find specific lists of people and where groups cross over. So on Legislative Bill 75, when doing the felon reenfranchisement, they pulled a list of people who supported voting rights and had an interest in criminal justice. And that list was a really big yield, because that overlap created a lot of people who were willing to support and take action on making sure we got rid of the 2-year waiting period. And other things similar to that is if it's a equal pay issue, you can cut the list just for, we'll cut it for women in this area, or something in that area. It's just using Dan and Vote Builder to really narrow in on who your supporters should be to find those lists versus just pulling, okay, I'm just going to grab every registered voter in the area, is not going to be as effective. So you can really narrow down who you're looking for and decide who you're looking for, and then cut specifically the list for those people. You'll get a lot more success that way. Next, after you found your supporters, you found all the different groups you want to work with, a big thing is going to get everybody around a single purpose, because everybody's interested in the issue and they all care about the issue, but it's important that when we're organizing, that we're actually organizing, and being actually organized means working for the same purpose with the agreed set of techniques. Some things people want to do, they may think is helpful, but won't be helpful to the overall cause of your policy. So really getting all those people in a room and saying, this is what we have to do, this is what's going to work for our policy to succeed is going to be key. And I think one of the best ways to get people to buy into that is looking at what has worked in other states, being able to show them this worked in this state, this worked in this state, this is a similar state to Nebraska. We may need to change this one aspect, but for the most part, we're going to keep this approach, getting people to buy in on this is our approach and this is what we're going to do, and that everybody isn't going to be off in their own space doing their own different things. And after you guys have all kind of agreed on, okay, these are going to be our tactics, this is what we really want to accomplish and how to do it, the big thing with grassroots organizing is going to be educating the supporters so that they just reach that level of confidence. A lot of people are going to be passionate, and a lot of people will be willing to do stuff, but they really won't know what to do. They might say, hey, what can I do about it today? How do I speak about it in a way that's going to work? Who do I even talk to about this issue? When's the best time for me to talk about this issue? And so as an organization, it's going to be really important to provide these supporters who want to do these things that information so that they really, really feel empowered to actually go do the work. And one way I think of getting them that information is just at every meeting, any time you're having a training, talking to new people, bringing new people in, is that you have a one sheet that they can take with them and study, and they just have a summary, a really basic summary of the policy, why it matters, why it's good or bad, some quick facts on it, the talking points that we want people to be talking about, and those talking points apply to, because like my experience working on Retain, Adjust Nebraska was, we may want to talk about the fiscal cost of the death penalty with some people, whereas with other people, say if we're talking Catholics, we might want to talk about, it's something that the last 3 popes have said they're strongly against. So when we give them those talking points, we want to make sure we give them the breakdown of it. Who, when you're delivering the message, are you delivering what talking points to? And also think with one sheet, give them an action item on it. Give them something that when they get it, even if it's their first time, they can take something that day and, hey, I can do this. Like, this is something I can get done, just something really simple, but that does make a difference, because we don't want to be giving people busy work, because that's the quickest way to lose people. Kind of as I spoke about a little bit before, one of the best things about community organizing is you're going to get a diverse pool of people who want to talk and who care about the issue, and they're going to have different reasons for it. And one of the big things is going to be getting them to talk about the issue on message, on your message, that's been tested. It's always kind of tough, but I find reminding people of the goal of what they want to accomplish is the best way to get them to say, okay, I'm here for this reason, but I realize this is my overall goal, so I'm going to talk about it in this frame, which is going to actually help my cause versus my reason for being for it may not help us. It might actually hurt us. So getting them to understand that the messaging has, for the most part, been tested and there's a reason behind it, and really getting them to buy into that and understand that that's what's going to help reach the goal. Next thing is when you're having these meetings, whether it's you're going to a different group, to a class, or anything like that, and you're talking to people and trying to get them interested and willing to take action on your policy, is to collect information. It's almost like you weren't there if you're not collecting data from these people. You want to get names, emails, what will they do, not just what they'll do, but what things they'll do that they're good at, because some people may say, you know, I'll do calls, but I'd rather write letters to the editor, and there might be a time where they can have them exclusively doing what they like to do, letters to the editor, but as long as, if you have the data and know that, okay, they are willing to make calls, then when you need more people making calls, you'll be able to make that ask to them and tell them, okay, we need you to make calls now. But you won't know that if you don't collect the data and all they've done so far is write letters to the editor. So it's really, really important to get the data. Even on why they care, there may be a certain point in time where the issue and the conversation on the issue has turned to something specific, and it may be the reason why they're working on this issue and that policy. So that's something, it's just so great to know, because then it's like, oh, you know, we're talking about this. This is the reason why you're really here. Can you write us a letter to the editor on this? Can you go and set up a meeting with your senator to talk to him about this and tell him your story about that, because that was really personal to you, and you understand that better than anybody. So yeah, that's going to be one of the big things. Also with collecting data, even if there's people in the meeting who are there, but they're not really going to be doing things on a regular basis and stuff, if you have that data, there might come a point where you just need all hands on deck, and they won't be one of your people who you pick up and like, oh, I can call so-and-so, but you can look through your data and say, hey, they were at this meeting. Let me call them and tell them, you know, hey, we really need 50 calls done today. Can I get you to make one of those calls? And that call somebody would make that they probably wouldn't, you would never even reach out to them because you wouldn't have the data on it. So really getting the data from the meetings and everything you're doing with people is so, so important. I would say the next thing, kind of after you've had your meetings and you've collected your data, is to go through all that and start setting up one-on-ones with everybody who you've met. A big reason is to get to know them. People will do so much more if they know you and like you, and also because you want to learn about their capabilities and skills. They could be a web designer who can help you come up with a social media post, or like we said before, they may have a reason for being working on the issue that's just really personal to them. If you don't have that one-on-one conversation and get that chance to really know them, you won't necessarily know that, and you'll miss out on that chance when it comes to really be able to activate them in that way that's really specific to them. Another thing, usually during one-on-ones, I think it's a good time to ask about their story, what brought them to the issue, and give them the job when they leave that one-on-one on refining it into a 2-minute elevator speech that they give to anybody who asks them about the issue. And since they'll have a one sheet, ask them when they're working on creating their elevator speech to work in some of the points, maybe the points that most apply to their story, so that they can use that to recruit and sway others, because ideally we want everybody we're meeting with and dealing with to get to the point where they're reaching out to others and leading things. So kind of starting that process at the one-on-one and getting them to that point is, I think, very important. And finally, with the one-on-one, I just always think, set up a follow-up, either whether it's the next time they come in and are doing calls, or just another coffee with them, and review the things you talked about, ask them about their elevator speech, have them give it to you, and just see their level of confidence, and if their knowledge is growing on the issue, how comfortable they're feeling, if they feel ready, like, hey, I've done enough where I could do a training on this issue. But just to keep in touch with them and make sure they know that you're there to help them with everything they need. The next part of organizing, I think, is empowering people. We kind of went through finding people, went through educating them, but the biggest thing is going to be empowering them. It's fun because you get to watch people take over, give them the training and stuff, and then they can do so much more than you could do on your own. It's like creating a copy of yourself or a clone or something. So it's really cool. They will think of ideas that you hadn't had, and new areas of outreach that they'll be able to find that you wouldn't be able to find, or that you just wouldn't have access to. And so at this point, once they're trained and capable and they have their 2-minute speech and they know the one sheet and all of that and the messaging, you should become a resource for them and provide support, encouragement, and sometimes you might have to redirect them. They might kind of start going off in the wrong direction a little bit, but kind of setting them free and letting them kind of lead themselves. And I think a big thing with empowering them and allowing them to do that and lead themselves is letting them in on the big picture. A lot of times people don't really get a chance to know why they're doing what they're doing, and it makes it hard for people to buy in. It's a lot easier to buy in if they know, okay, this is the big picture, which is usually the big picture is going to be passing your policy goal, but also the shorter term goals. Like if you have a monthly goal of 5 house parties in a particular area, tell them why. Tell them because we want to grow our supporters in this area so that we're able to have this senator's constituents reach out to them or something like that. But give them the reasons why, because that's going to inspire them, like, oh yeah, we need this to get to our goal, versus if you keep them in the dark and just say, we need 5 house parties in this area, it seems really arbitrary, and people aren't really going to have the same buy-in and level of, okay, I got to do this right now, as they would if they know the purpose behind it. Access to information and tools, I think, is huge. I think it's important. We're training our advocates and people to work for us, and a lot of times we have all the tools, and you don't want to be a bottleneck. If you have somebody trained up to the point where they can educate people on policy and do outreach, let them have the access to the tools. So, if maybe they're having dinner with some of their friends or something, and they've been talking about your policy throughout dinner, and their friends have all bought in, they say, hey, do you want to make some calls? Their friends are like, sure, we'll make calls, where they can set up the calls. They can just set up a phone bank so they don't have to call you, and it's 6 o'clock at night, and you don't answer your phone, and then you missed out on however many calls because you were controlling so much of it. So I think that's a big thing. It's just training people to the point where you feel like you can trust them to have the power that they need to really do things on their own, and you not become a bottleneck and really just guide them and support when they need it. One of those things to do this is toolkits for volunteers. If you give them everything they need for events and organizing themselves, things like one-sheets, volunteer sign-up forms, sheets with Evergreen Tasks for interested people they may meet, contact information, and like an outline or a speech presentation that they can give. I know for Retain, we had just a box that was always ready, a couple of them that people could take and go and grab a projector and go do a PowerPoint. So if their church leader said, you know what, I'd be interested in having you guys speak, they could say, oh, okay, let me stop by there. They can go. And it might be something where everybody who was on staff had something going on that night. So really having them to be able to have the ability to go and lead the organizing themselves makes a huge, huge difference. You're going to have a lot more events and be able to recruit a lot more people into it when you give up that power and give it to your supporters. And then along with that, empowering support is just as important at the top, where we talked about getting the information about them, training them. We also want to train them to get the data that from their events. So, names of supporters they met, where they live, reason for supporting, level of interest, and there might be different miscellaneous things on the particular policy that you want collected, but just having your volunteers ready and knowing that, okay, I should be getting this particular information to anybody I'm talking to and getting it from them is really important, because that can all come back to you, and they don't have to be sent out by you to get it, but you get that information back. Next is just making sure everything's coordinated. I think along with giving up kind of so much and letting people take the lead, it's really important that everybody's still kind of on the same page. I usually think like a weekly email at least is something that should be sent out so everybody understands what's going on, what upcoming events are happening, and maybe even something like a Facebook group just for supporters to run things by each other and, mention, hey, I'm going to be here, I'm going to be there, and all of that. And that also, it stops you from becoming a bottleneck where somebody wants to do something and someone else wants to do something that might be similar. You don't have to be the one. One person reaches out to you, and then the other person reaches out to you later, and you coordinate between them and send it out. Just letting people do it directly between themselves is helpful, it's faster, and it just takes work off your plate.
Brad, before you continue, let's open it up for some questions. If people have a question for Brad, feel free to put it in the Q&A box, or you can hit the raise your hand button at the top of the screen, and you can ask a verbal question. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, Brad, you can keep going. We got a couple more slides.
All right. So yeah, the next thing I kind of mentioned before in some of the other slides are having evergreen tasks, just things people can always be doing. I think it's one of the best ways to keep people engaged, because they don't really have to feel like there's a down period, there's not something for them to do, and they can just be simple things like letters to the editor. It could be a social media post. It could be something like, every Tuesday, NCR is going to post something. Can you share it for us? It can be a virtual phone bank that they can always get on and make calls, or a list of emails that they can always be working on, but just something, or something totally different, but just something for volunteers to always have access to. So if I have an extra 2 hours on my Sunday and I want to do something to help this policy, I'm able to do it, and I don't have to, get in touch with somebody to figure out what's that going to be. And by the time I hear back and stuff, an hour of that time that I could be spent doing it is gone. Just having that, always there for people, I think is huge. It just saves a lot of time and makes people feel like no matter what, they can always be involved and always be working. Another huge thing I think for community organizing is getting people together. A lot of the stuff can be done remotely with computers and stuff and all that, just like how we're on a webinar now instead of all in one place. And sometimes, necessity means that it's got to be done separately, but a lot of community organizing is about the community and building a community of people supporting a policy. So I think that trying to do it where people can get together as much as possible is so important. Successful community organizing, so it looks like a bingo night with regulars where people do not miss their 3-hour phone bank for the world, because that's their chance where they get, they'll do their calls and stuff, but it's also their chance where they get to go gossip with so-and-so and talk about last week and all that. And that'll really, really help in keeping people engaged and keeping them there and coming back and doing the work.
Well, Brad, thank you so much for walking us through community organizing. We want to be mindful of the time and make sure people can get on with their day if they need to. We will have a copy of Brad's slides, and we'll send them out to you. We just had a couple more that we didn't quite get to, so we'll be happy to share those with you all. And you can always follow up with Brad if you've got additional questions. We do want to mention that we've got a webinar series continuing next week, and I will pull that up so you can see the schedule. We have Abby Kretz from the Heartland Worker Center. We'll be talking about doing community assessment. So this is a great opportunity to take what Brad has taught us this week about community organizing and then doing an assessment of the needs of the community and how you can bridge both of those together. So it's about noon. So thank you all so much for joining us on our second webinar. Special thanks to Brad from Nebraska Civic Engagement for leading us. And we hope to see you this Friday at the Nonprofit Hub in Lincoln for the outside game training, and then again next Tuesday at 11:30, same time, same channel, for our next webinar. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great Tuesday.